1 week before Superman released, people were asking how high could it fly? 1 week before Supergirl releases, people are arguing about what counts as breaking even. Think about that for 1 second. We're not talking about breakout tracking. We're not talking about surprise momentum. We're talking about accounting. We're debating whether Supergirl needs 315 million, 450 million, 500 million, or even more for Warner Brothers to call it a success. And that might be the most important receipt of all, because if you've been watching this channel, we've already talked about the marketing. We've already talked about the tracking. We've already talked about audience interest. Now we're 1 week from release, and we're still talking about survival metrics instead of success metrics. So, let's talk about it. What's going on, everyone? Chris here. Welcome back to The Critical Nerd. For returning viewers, thank you and welcome back. For new viewers, thanks for stopping by. If you enjoy entertainment news, box office analysis, Hollywood chaos, and the occasional corporate reality check, do me a favor, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, ring that notification bell, and join the conversation below. And remember, keep your expectations low and your receipts high. Because today isn't really a story about break-even numbers. It's a story about why we're still discussing break-even numbers at all. If you followed my Supergirl coverage, this progression should sound familiar. When the first marketing started arriving, the conversation was awareness. People knew the movie existed. Then the discussion became audience interest. Were people actually excited? Then the tracking numbers began showing up. And that's where things started getting interesting. Because awareness and demand, they're not the same thing. Hollywood often treats them like they're interchangeable. They aren't. Millions of people can know your movie exists. That doesn't mean millions of people are planning on buying tickets. And over the past few months, that has been the recurring question surrounding Supergirl. Not visibility, not recognition, demand. And what audiences actually show up? Now let's compare that to Superman. Whether you love Superman, whether you hated Superman, whether you thought James Gunn saved DC or destroyed it, one thing was undeniable. People did show up. Before release, the conversation centered around upside. Could it hit this number? Could it exceed projections? Could it overperform? Those were the debates. Now, how different that is from the conversation surrounding Supergirl. Because right now, the discussion isn't, how big could Supergirl get? The discussion is, how little does Supergirl need to make before Warner Brothers can call it a win? It's not the same conversation, not even in the same ballpark, not even close. And that's why this matters. Now let's talk about the latest tracking. Current projections have generally placed Supergirl around the $50 million domestic opening range. Now, could it come in higher? Yeah, absolutely. Could it come in lower? Yeah, that's possible too. Tracking is not destiny. We've seen movies overperform. We've seen movies underperform. But the number itself isn't the important part. The important part is what the number created. Because the conversation immediately shifted away from excitement and toward justification. Almost overnight, articles started appearing discussing break-even points, profitability thresholds, success metrics, alternative definitions of winning. And that's where the famous $315 million figure entered the conversation. Now, got to be very careful here. I'm not saying the people using the $315 million number are lying. I am saying many people are using that number without explaining what it actually means. Because when most viewers hear Supergirl only needs $315 million worldwide, they assume that means make $315 million and you're profitable. That's not how box office accounting works. Yeah, remember, movie theaters take a percentage. International markets return different percentages. Marketing costs exist. Distribution costs exists. The studio does not simply keep every dollar that appears on Box Office Mojo. And that's why so many analysts have challenged that number. Not because profitability is impossible, not because the movie is automatically doomed, but because the math is more complicated than a single headline. What matters for this video isn't whether the final number is 315 million or 450 million or 500 million or somewhere else entirely. The important receipt is that we're having this debate in the first place. Now, think about what a healthy blockbuster conversation normally looks like. A healthy blockbuster talks about momentum, pre-sales, audience demand, potential upside, expansion potential, franchise growth. Instead, the dominant conversation around Supergirl has become, what's the budget? What's the break-even point? What counts as success? What counts as failure? How much is enough? And that tells us something important. It tells us that confidence isn't where Warner Brothers would like it to be. Because when audiences are overwhelmingly excited, nobody spends weeks arguing over accounting formulas. And this is where things become bigger than Supergirl. Because this isn't just another superhero movie. This is the second theatrical chapter of the new DC universe. The first real test whether audiences are buying into the universe beyond Superman. That's the actual question. Not whether Kara is a good character, not whether the actress is talented, not whether James Gunn can tell a good story. The question is whether the audience is ready to follow the universe itself. Because every cinematic universe eventually faces this challenge. It's one thing to sell Batman. It's one thing to sell Superman. It's another thing to entirely sell the next chapter. That's where universes prove their strength, or expose their weaknesses. The good news for Warner Brothers is that all of these debates are about to end. The tracking arguments, the break-even arguments, the social media arguments, the YouTube arguments, all of it. Because next weekend, audiences finally get to vote. And unlike studio press releases, unlike social media trends, unlike carefully crafted narratives, ticket sales don't need interpretation. They are the receipt. If audiences show up, the story changes immediately. If they don't, the story changes immediately. That's why opening weekend matters so much. Not because it answers every question, but because it answers the biggest one. Were audiences convinced? For months, the conversation around Supergirl has moved from awareness to interest to tracking to profitability. And now we're 1 week away from finding out what actually matters. The audience's answer. Maybe Supergirl surprises everyone. Maybe it doesn't. But if we're still debating break-even maths a week from release, that might be the biggest warning sign we've seen so far. Because successful franchises usually spend release week discussing excitement, not accounting. But what do you think? Are people reading too much into the break-even debate? Or does the conversation itself tell us something about the audience confidence heading into opening weekend? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and share this video with a fellow movie fan. And as always, keep your expectations low and your receipts high. I'm Chris, this is The Critical Nerd, and I'll see you in the next video.